Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't really think about what I might say given the opportunity, but I just have a few thoughts. This is my first experience on the Finance Committee. I did serve several terms on the Appropriations Committee in the past, but it's a difficult thing to discuss a state budget when you're only talking about one side of it. If someone said to me, Rob, you've got to come up with this revenue number, figure out a way to do it. That's a reasonable job, and I can respect anyone for trying to come up with the best solution to finalize those numbers in a fair way. I guess my question, though, is that what's happening here in the Finance Committee? I noticed that we're raising taxes to the tune of $930.6 million in the first year in this package, from my understanding, and 1.277.7 in the second year. So I guess what I want to know is, where do those numbers come from? Somebody had to come along and say there's a target. We need to raise this much revenue. Is it a matter of the Appropriations Committee came up with a budget that determined what we need to come up with for revenue that led us to this number? And if so, is it automatic that this committee should just agree with that increase in need? Just a question for either of the chairs if they have any thoughts on it.
While we certainly strive to collaborate, that is not how this package was created. We recognize our role and the impact of our decisions on the economy of the state of Connecticut, on families in the state of Connecticut, just as we did under bipartisanship the last 2 years. That philosophy was the same then as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And as I indicated earlier, that because of the series of one-times that we agreed to in the previous bipartisan budgets, we have to make decisions because that revenue either is gone and we have to find new revenue to replace it, or we continue some of the decisions that we made under bipartisanship, some of which we have, and some of those things that we agreed to under bipartisanship that are one-times continue here today. It's not the best way to budget. It's not what best way to do a tax package, but there are certain realities in terms of, as has been said here, it's not like Democrats don't like, that Democrats love taxes and Republicans don't uniformly.
Mm-hmm.
There are a wide range of opinions on your side. There are a wide range of opinions on our side, and it's about putting something together that will pass here today and ultimately under some configuration going forward that will pass in the late May or early June. But it is not driven exclusively. We have conversations, but ultimately this committee decides what it is best in terms of raising revenue. And a lot of that, Senator, was driven by the fact that we were faced with $629 million in year one and $641 million in year two in one times that we all agreed to. Those of us, you did not, I understand, I'll make that clear, you did not, but everyone else did in a bipartisan process that I'll again say I believe served our state well.
I appreciate that, and I'm trying to be extremely fair in recognizing the difficult job that you have. If someone asked me to be the finance chair under our financial circumstances, I would be headed out the opposite exit door as fast as I could. So I can completely sympathize with how difficult your job is and the role that you fulfill. I guess what I'm driving at, though, is really there is a policy decision that has to be made every time a state budget comes before us. And I understand that we're only working on half of that equation in the Finance Committee, and the Appropriations Committee works on the other half. But somewhere, someone is making a policy decision that says we are going to increase the amount of spending and taxes in this state given the current financial circumstances, and this is how much we're going to do it. And ultimately, the Appropriations Committee is constrained by that number, and the Finance Committee is also, well, I don't know if constrained is the right word, but we developed that as a target. And I guess I'm asking because I'm really trying to figure out exactly who I should talk to make them understand what exactly is happening outside of this building. I think it's pretty clear to most of our constituents that Connecticut is a wonderful and great place to live as a state, and a certain amount of taxation is needed to maintain that quality of life. But I would say that, at least in my case, the constituents that I represent overwhelmingly believe that we are spending and taxing too much as a state. And I know that there is a debate we can have about the services that are important to our citizens and what are going to be contained in the Appropriations Committee. But I also think we are reaching a point where we are dangerously approaching the inability for Connecticut to grow as its own entity. A couple of the other speakers mentioned that our national economy is doing quite well. It's booming, in fact. I think we're very fortunate that that's happening. I think that that is one of the few positives that we can look to as the state legislature in Connecticut that is helping keeping us afloat. I think that the tax structure over budgets in recent years have caused the more affluent members of our state citizenry to consider leaving, and in many cases they have. I have lots of people in my own district that have put their homes on the market. I'm a real estate agent. I've been in real estate for maybe 20 years now. When I first got into real estate, I can't remember the last time someone asked me to sell their house because they wanted to move to South Carolina or something like that. And today, that's the most common thing that I deal with. It's out there. It's a real thing. And when we're deciding what the state's finances are going forward, we have to keep this in mind. We cannot just keep ignoring that. So there is a policy decision, and that policy decision is, are we going to reduce the size of government and the amount of burden we're putting on our citizens, or are we going to increase it? And if we're going to increase it, how much? And I'm just trying to be fair and trying to determine who's making that determination. Are we making that determination here in the Finance Committee to say that we are only going to spend this amount of money, or we're going to spend as much as the Appropriations Committee tells us they need? That's a question I really want to know, because I want to know where the buck really stops.
Well, I would say, so far as the finance package is concerned, it stops here, and I can assure you that if the chairs of the Appropriations Committee were here, they would probably prefer that we had raised some more revenue.
Okay. In fairness, I can appreciate that very much. For me personally, I want to thank both of you gentlemen for recognizing that I did, in fact, vote against the compromise budget that happened last year, and for the same exact reason that I'm going to vote no today, which is that I believe that we are on a trend to further negatively impact our state's economy and ultimately lead to less revenue and a lower quality of life. I think that's a common opinion back home. I think that my constituents believe that. A budget is certainly a collection of priorities. I think that we have mismanaged those priorities over the last decade that I have been here. I've only voted for one budget, and that was the Republican budget that passed both chambers narrowly, but then was vetoed by the governor. And that was because it held fast to a principle that was very important to me, and that was that we were going to put the brakes on and not raise a single tax and put another single burden on the citizens in this state, and we were not going to cut any aid to towns, because that is, in effect, a tax also. Every time we tell the citizens of our state, the businesses in our state, the retired people who are struggling on fixed incomes in our state, that we're raising taxes again, we're just telling them, if you haven't made plans to relocate, you better start now. That is a terrible, terrible message to send. I campaigned on the notion that what we ought to be doing every day in this building is developing policies that make Connecticut a more attractive place for people to live, to work, to run a business, to grow a business, to relocate a business here maybe, and to retire. And if we're not doing that in every vote we make, we are making a mistake. And I believe that passing this finance package is telling people the exact opposite. I'm trying to do it as respectfully as I can. I understand we have a difference in political opinion about the role of government in our state, but we have reached the point where I think it's out of hand. The numbers and the types of taxes that are in this budget are a key indication for me of where we are. I think that in the past, I know that the majority has felt that taxing people that are high income earners seem to be the way to go. But I think that even you have realized that those high income earners are a lot more capable of relocating and costing us the tax revenue that they provide. And that's why you see more regressive taxes. I think that's the reason why tolls are before us. They're going to affect even the poorest, hardest working folks in our state. So I would just caution my colleagues that any one of us at any time can say no. All of us can say no. We can say, no, we're not going to spend this much, and we'll force the Appropriations Committee to go back to the drawing board and come up with a budget that spends less than we are allowing them to spend here. I'm going to say no today as a message to my colleagues, to the chairs, and to the Appropriations Committee, and anyone else who will listen, that I think that we're already paying too much in taxes, and we need to go the other way and make Connecticut more attractive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your comments. Representative Zullo.